magazines have existed for a long time. But it was this curious coincidence that when the internet hit, everybody was getting Macs in their home. Design software became much more user-friendly. Like in the 80s, it was really difficult. Now, in design, it's not too hard. And people realised, or young people especially realised, that it was actually quite easy to make a magazine. So, mainstream commercial magazines are very financially intensive. You actually need a lot of money to make them work. But the indies, you can actually do it quite cheaply. So it's both. I don't actually think it is a reaction against the digital. I think what it is a way of thinking, what is it that magazines in print, because most of the indies are in print, what is it about print that makes magazines special, and how can we focus on that? And then how can we use the digital environment to help us? So they use it in terms of designing, they use it in terms of sending PDFs of their work off to printers, usually in China where printing is really cheap to be printed. And they use it for marketing, so they've got a website, and because they're indies, all the indies are really friendly with each other and often, they recommend, if I go to the Monster Children website, they'll recommend I go and have a look at these other magazines. So there's this nice kind of kinship community thing going on. So I don't think it's a reaction against it. I think they're just saying, look, there's something really special about print, and because we're not tied to the marketplace in the same way that mainstream magazines are, we can actually experiment with what magazines can do. And I think from that point, once that started, it's kind of just cascaded, because they're really interesting. They're as much creative projects as they are communication media. Because they're not overtly commercial, I think there's always going to be groups of young people, especially, who find that really interesting. It gives them an immense amount of creative freedom in using, I'm going to say journalism, but it's not always that. Some things like McSweeney's are fiction, and there are art project magazines as well. The other thing, and especially with social media, that's exploded, over the last few years, is that idea of communities forming online. I think that idea of community is really big as well, and that's something the indies are all about as well. They don't want to talk to everyone. They just say, this is what we do. We're into, I don't know, hand illustrated this, and we're into that, and we put it together. And if you're interested in that, this is where you can come. So yeah, I think it's part of the digital environment, but they're just being really medium specific, which actually doesn't surprise me, because I think there's so many wonderful things about print that just because we have all these other digital options, it's a question of what you're losing if you throw print out. I don't think so. I think, all right, I can be completely personal here. I mean, I've subscribed to the strangest magazines from the strangest places around the world. Now, would I have ever found out about Casino A4, the magazine of aggressive melancholy from Helsinki, without the internet? The answer's no. There are very few physical spaces that I could have visited in Sydney to find that magazine. I think I saw it once in one newsagent. There is a specialist shop like Mag Nation which does a lot of those things, but I don't go there very often. Whereas I can sit at home and go, oh God, that looks interesting, click subscribe, give them some money, and then eventually in the post something will arrive. And it's quite lovely. It's quite lovely waiting for them. So no, I don't think you actually could do it. So that's interesting, isn't it? It is all about print, and print is certainly, in this form anyway, is in a state of revival or rejuvenation, but it couldn't happen without the internet. Yeah, it's interesting, because it's only a paradox if you expect each new media form to completely overtake the last one. Now, if you expect that, then yes, it's a paradox. But if you don't expect that, and people like Henry Jenkins would say, well, this isn't the way things have always happened, that new media, new technologies will come in and they don't wipe out the old. I think what ends up happening is the old has to redefine itself and ask that question, which is a really important question: what does my medium offer? And that's what I think the indies have done. And I think that's why they're so much more interesting than the mainstream magazines as well, because they've actually bothered to ask that question in a way I think mainstream magazines are now just starting to ask. What is it that we've got to offer if we're going to stay with print? Well, look, I think it's positive. I think it's a wonderful thing. You know, you can get access to information and to magazines now that you couldn't get before. You can know about magazines that you didn't get before. It's not parallel to what's happening in newspapers. It's just not. I mean, newspapers are shit quick. You know, the print newspapers, it's dire. But for magazines, it's just not like that. I just think magazines have been really smart. And I don't think they fear the online world at all.